Hey guys, Chris here for Thoman's Guitars and Basses. In today's Guitar Tech Tips, I want to talk about passive and active bass electronics. In this series, I want to show you how to fix the most common issues and how to set up your guitars and basses without too many special tools. Active pickups with a passive tone control, passive pickups with an active preamp, switchable passive-active electronics, it's really confusing, especially if you're new to playing bass. Let's talk about all that in today's video. In case you enjoy Guitar Tech Tips, make sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell. Thank you. Let's see what our options are in terms of passive and active bass circuitries. First is a fully passive electronic, which means that the bass has passive pickups with a passive volume and tone knob. You can't boost any frequencies and the tone knob is not an EQ. It's a low-pass filter that takes away more and more of the high frequencies as you turn it down. Perfect examples of this bass type are traditional Fender Precision and jazz basses. Pros, you'll get a very dynamic and honest playing feel and tone. You'll never have battery issues because you don't need one, and it's a very simple and reliable wiring type. Cons, the tone of a passive bass is less tweakable than if it was active. You will lose some signal, especially treble frequencies, if you're using long cables due to the high impedance of passive electronics. You can of course solve this issue by using a buffer. Use a short cable first, then the buffer, and then the long cable. Second option, passive pickups with an active preamp and EQ. This is the most modern type of active circuitry, and you'll find this in almost all new active basses. Even though the pickups are passive, you will need a battery for the active preamp. This circuitry maintains most of the dynamics of a traditional passive electronic, and on top of that, you can cut and boost frequencies with the active EQ. On most basses, you can turn the active preamp on and off, with which you can turn a bass like this into a traditional passive instrument. Pros, you will not lose tone with longer cables, and you can radically change the sound of the bass without even touching the EQ on the amp. Cons, you will need a battery and you have to be aware of how full it is. If you want to make sure that it lasts long, make sure to unplug the cable when you're done playing. Another issue is that pedals might not react well to the hot signal of active preamps. If the pedals you're using don't have an input gain knob, you might want to be careful with boosting frequencies with the active EQ. The third option is using active pickups instead of an active preamp. This time, the pickups will need the battery to produce enough signal. Without it, active pickups actually have a really low output. This is exactly how active EMG pickups work. Expect a lot more high and low frequencies than you get from passive pickups and a lot more compression too. Pros, you'll get a very good signal to noise ratio, you'll not lose tone if you're using longer cables thanks to low impedance, and you'll get a wide frequency range which makes them great for modern bass tones and heavy music. Cons, again, you will have to be aware of battery life. And the same as with active preamps, some pedals might have issues with the hot signal. What if you want to swap passive to active electronics in your bass? In theory, it's going to be simple. You have to find the fitting pickup or active preamp to your bass. EMG has many different active pickups for all kinds of basses, and Sadowski, Glockenklang, Aguilar, etc. will make really high quality bass preamps with EQs for most common bass types. If you want to see some recommendations, I'll put a gear link in the description below. You will of course also need some extra space for the battery, which in many cases means that you will have to make an extra battery compartment. That might be an issue, and it definitely should not be underestimated. Another important thing to keep in mind is the hole size for the pots. There are metric and imperial standards for basses and aftermarket electronics, and even in the metric world, you'll find narrow and wider shafts. Please always measure the original pots and compare them to the ones you want to replace them with. And now it's time for a test ride. I'll play the same thing on the Fender Precision bass and on this beautiful front space Medoc 4. The Fender is 100% passive, and the front space has passive Delano pickups with an active Glockenklang preamp and EQ. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions left. I'd also love to know what you want to see in this series. Don't be afraid of setting up and fixing your guitars and basses. It's time to become your own guitar tech. Finally, thank you. Then let's do it again. What if you want to swap passive electronic? Look at it, it's small.